Welcome to this Roll for Crit review. Today we're looking at quite a big game, and it's only Act 1. This is Middara, Unintentional Malum, like I said, Act 1. This is one of those big story campaign games. Obviously, I think the one that you'll be thinking of, or you've already thought of, is Gloomhaven, in which you will be playing the roles of heroes, going through a story and finding out about the world of Middara. Pretty much, it's like an alternate world that is actually attached to Earth, which they will refer to multiple times. And it also has an anime vibe you'll see throughout, and as we bring up more other things. And basically, you will go through different encounters, going through this fun little book, which,
This fun little book.
Little book.
It's just a little thing.
As you go through, you can flip through and see some of the items, and there will actually be interactions. They'll tell you how to set them up, but some things you actually cannot read unless not read without trying hard.
You're not supposed to.
Yeah, without this little red filter thing. So that way you can also make sure that you don't accidentally read, oh, that was a trap or something.
Yeah, so there's a lot of story content in the game, but the way that the actual game works, essentially it's a dungeon crawl. If you're familiar with that style of game, you'll probably be familiar with most of the elements here. This is just a random layout of tiles we've put, but each scenario will tell you what you need to set up and which monsters are going to come into play right away, or maybe tokens like loot or different kinds of things that you'll be interacting with. And each player on their turn, they're going to have their own character, or you might have multiple, depends how many players you're working with. You're going to have a set of stamina points, and you can spend those stamina points on actions. For example, a common obvious one would be to move. So you would spend one, and you can move, and you have a movement speed. So for instance, you could go up to whatever that is, wherever you need to go. Not diagonally, and you're worrying about enemies. There's also different types of terrain. Those might obstruct your movement, or they might make it harder to move out of. Sometimes there are different effects, such as when you're standing in water, it's harder, you cannot dodge enemy attacks. All kinds of different things going on there. You might use your stamina points to interact with things, like I said, that are on the map for different objectives, or a lot of the time you're probably going to be using them to attack. We'll talk a little bit about combat in a minute. But yeah, each character also has different stats. They have a set of skills, and as you go, you're going to be making skill checks. That's one of the big things you're going to be doing, and that involves rolling dice, as many games often do. And of course, you're trying to hit a number, such as if it were an attack, you'd be trying to meet a defense number. And you're going to have different symbols that appear, and depending on the different items you have equipped or your abilities, those symbols might trigger and make your effects even stronger. And you can see here's a whole layout of just some of the more basic early items that you might get a hold of. There's healing things, there's weapons, there's armor, there's all kinds of upgrades and special abilities that you can get as the game goes on.
Now, as this is a dungeon crawl, combat is going to be a big thing. And the way that works is, regardless on whether you are attacking or the enemy's attacking, you're usually going to have 2 dice to roll, depending on like what weapons you have or what the enemy says on the bottom of their chart. We actually have the huge pile over here, so those are just some fun examples you can see of some of the weird things you may come across. And you will roll the 2 dice, and then compare it to their defense value. If you match it or go higher, you're able to possibly deal damage. Now, you'll deal damage equal to difference, but you may get some bonuses, so even if you match it, you may still get some extra damage thrown on top. Now, what this game also adds in, which fits with the theme, is you can chain or do follow-up attacks, possibly depending on what effects you have, which means you can just keep on trying to beat them down into the ground. If you are able to hit your opponent's life points 2 or above, you've killed that enemy. What happens is they will go off the field, and you will get to draw from the combatant loot deck. Now, depending on the difficulty of the match, you may have higher rewards in there, usually just higher amounts of gold, which you'll use for buying later. But there are a couple unique cards, like one lets you get unique loot, which is their own separate thing. One that actually lets you get pull specifically from cards designed for certain monsters. So, for example, if you defeated this cave sickle, one of the very first monsters you get, even he has a couple unique things that are designed as if like Monster Hunter that you got from that creature.
Right.
So that is where you get a lot of the gold and a lot of farming and stuff. But the campaign isn't just simply kill everything. That may be one of the scenarios. Sometimes you will need to, like, as you said, interact with certain locations, exit. So it's not simply just a murder hobo run.
Yeah, the story is pretty involved, and there are also, which characters that you have in play might end up being a thing in the story where they'll specifically refer to the characters. It really is a very involved combination between the gameplay and the storytelling.
Right, we actually didn't even bring that up, but a lot of these games usually you name your character, they're faceless so you can sort of put yourself in. This is not that. You are playing through the story of Nightingale Arson and her fellow compatriots.
Yeah, you sure
and go through. So this feels a lot more like watching a show or something.
Yeah,
even though you are making this, I guess a video game maybe is a better decision. Comparison.
It is a very anime vibe. Definitely feels like made me think of old school JRPGs for video game comparison. It's that kind of thing, like a Final Fantasy, Square Enix.
And they know it because for example, these are two items I thought were just hilarious that I found early on. So I had to too many belts, the badass leather jacket. How many anime characters do you know that have too many anime belts? Like half of them.
Yeah, I would argue they have just enough. Yeah, so it's definitely. It's not like it's not a satirical game, but it has
it's
a sense
not
of
full
humor.
on satirical. It's just
goofy
jabs itself.
Though. It's light.
It reminds me of maybe something like on the lighthearted shonen jumps when they sort of they know what they are. I guess in that sense.
Yeah, it's definitely, again, I'll try not to compare it too much to Gloomhaven, but that is the big campaign dungeon crawler game in recent years that I think people will be thinking of. Kingdom Death is another big game I've seen people compare it to, but we don't have as much of a frame of reference for that one. But like I said, the story is definitely a much heavier component of this. There's actually there's going to be an app right now. They also have MP3 files on their website where there's the whole audiobook basically of the story, and you will want that because there are passages of the story that are many pages long.
Yeah, no, this game.
You don't want to just read it out loud to your friends because you'll get tired.
Some of those, you just have a card you read through or something. Any of those American more story-themed games, this will just go through 3 or 4 pages of them talking dialogue. You are actually going through their story.
Yeah, and I thought, it's not bad. It's not going to win any awards. It's not going to win a Pulitzer or anything like that. But for a board game, and for this kind of a game, sometimes those stories can be a little light. They definitely went out of their way to try to add something so that you actually do kind of get to know these characters and care a little bit about what they're doing and what this insane world is of Middara.
Right, there was when you very start on, and once again sticking with the anime trope, you start off with the school exam. They were probably just a tournament fight away from being a Naruto episode, and they just talked about stuff like, yeah, my parents are farmers and stuff. You don't usually get that because I think they try to keep things in a lot of other games more you can put yourself in. So unless you're when we go back to many things compared to D&D when you can for example, craft it to make sure this is my character. You're great, I'm going to make sure you see this character again or backstory. Mm-hmm. They're we're just going to skip over that and build the characters ourselves so you don't have...
Yeah, there's no faceless protagonist like a JRPG would have. Everybody is one of the fun side characters. Which is cool. And speaking of these characters, there's as you go throughout the game, you upgrade them, you customize their.
You will get more possible
abilities.
Characters.
Yeah, there's more characters that can enter into the game.
And there's even on some packs that you didn't want to make sure. We tried very hard to make sure. I think there shouldn't be anything on the board now of secret. Don't open until we tell you in case depending on what happens.
Right. There's some of that. It's not a legacy game, but it is a campaign game, and stuff will change. But one thing that's nice that they tried to do is that you're able to specialize your character in pretty much any way that you want, ideally, so that it's not just this is the tank character, this is the healer character, although they do kind of start out with some of those attributes.
And they sort of do lean a little bit. For example, just take this character here. He has the ability to re-roll a dodge. So that usually means he's going to be in their face, and that probably means more of a DPS roll. But the truth is, everyone can usually use a dodge. So yes, optimally you can build your character. I still think you can have fun to build the characters how you want them to build.
Yeah.
We followed through with this character. I went down. There's actually skill trees, and I actually started off in the sort of summoning skill tree because I just thought that was cool, and I want my ranger to have a good pet in D&D. So this is my way of getting that. But yes, there's the 5 skill trees, which, as you were saying, you can build from. All of them you can sort of mix and match too, as long as you have the XP for it. You have to slowly build up through it. But it still allows for a lot of fun mixing around. Like, this is more of your rogues, subterfuge, you could probably guess. I'm not even trying to read this one, but I know this is like more healing and stuff. This is, like I said, summoning. This is your straight up fighter, martial. And this is more like your warlock, like hurting yourself for more damaging spells. Like, these are your magic-y-ish, but these are more physical.
Yeah, there's a lot. There's a lot that you can choose from, and it's really up to you. And there's tons of content to do it in.
I mean, this isn't everything. We so much on the board that we had to get. I bought these at Walmart for very cheap. I feel like you're going to have to need something like this. There's so much to keep track of in terms of...
It's one of those games, definitely. There's a ton going on. The combat is definitely, compared to, I think, some of these other games, simpler. It's really, like I said, if you've played a game like Descent, it's very much an action point kind of a system. You move, you attack, you roll dice, you hit things. And the other thing is that it's pretty relaxed in terms of its pace.
I think the difference is, recently a lot of the games we played felt like you can't do everything. I think the example, I guess it's a dungeon crawl sort of too, the Lord of the Rings game, where we felt like you literally, you're done. Like, sure, there's, like, everything has a bit of a timer, but this felt like a bit more like, and I think lighthearted anime, you're just having fun. Like, even the combat, you said it's simple, but when you're rolling dice, you're like, I feel Descent, usually it's like a bolt in this, so I'm dealing 3 damage or something. This is like, all right, that's 6 plus 7, 13. I beat that by 4, but now I add like 6 more damage, and now I do a follow-up attack.
That's true. Once you're into it, it almost seems like just like second nature, because you're just like, that's the number. What's the difference? What are the symbols? Mm-hmm. But yeah, there are definitely a bunch of steps that are involved with it. It's much less. It's not really brain burny.
Yeah,
which I think it's a positive for me. I think for some people, they will come to the game and say, like the combat I wish was a little more involved. But I think where that involvement comes in is in the specialization and the customization and like deciding how you divvy up your roles and where you go on the map and everything like that. So I think it's an okay trade-off. I feel like this game is more suited to a player who likes the dungeon crawl experience, but really wants more of the theme and the story involved, because that's what it brings really heavily.
Yeah, it made me think of more like binging a show, like going through when Gloomhaven felt more like just the class, like very classical.
Yeah,
and yeah,
combat,
I'm gonna keep going
tactics,
back. And I think that one had a lot more of thinking like, we have like 2 more turns left. How can I be the most optimal with my turns? When this is like, How can I bash his face in?
Yeah, it's not as punishing. You can just kind of, you're just hanging out, like you said.
Right, and there were moments where like all of a sudden I was down to like 2 health because I made a misstep with health. But then you just came in and you were just like, heal, and then the other 2 people we were playing with, because you have named characters, and even though you can specialize them, it feels a little easier to swap people out, I feel. Mm-hmm. Like someone else could take control of Nightingale if we didn't, or if we have more than 2 players. If it's just 2 of us, we'll just take care of them. So it'll be easier. But yeah, like I was going back, then they go in and this help deal damage. Then we were able to actually, something that I thought was all of a sudden insurmountable for 1 second, all of a sudden, next thing you know, we pushed it off like a cliff.
Yeah, I think we found it to be, for the most part, on the easier side of these types of games. Your mileage may vary, but so like if you're looking for like a super hard experience, maybe it won't keep you satisfied in that regard. But it wasn't like so easy that it was insulting. Just it didn't feel like we were struggling.
It's, as you said, I just think it doesn't need as much that extreme brain
it's
power.
Not painful.
Yes.
You can actually play a few sessions in a row and you won't feel like you need to take a long nap afterward. Here are our crits and misses for Middara, Act 1. Crits. The anime-inspired theme and artwork of the game is unique, and there is a ton of in-depth story content that goes beyond what most other games offer.
The fantasy, along with the colorful anime tropes it's mixed with, I think helps it stand out from its other heavy campaign board games that we're seeing more of as of late.
There's great depth of specialization when it comes to customizing your characters, and the game doesn't make you feel pigeonholed into choosing one specific class or another for the character you've chosen.
Middara sacrifices the blank slate character in order to give you ones with actual names and backstories. This allows them to make them interweave with a much more interesting story, but you're still allowed to have fun and maybe make them either a spellcaster or go full on DPS.
The scenarios aren't as punishing as other games in this genre tend to be. Players are able to explore, enjoy the setting, and take their time with the game.
Middara seems to be less about grinding and having that really hardcore RPG experience, and more about following the story of our lovable heroes. Misses. While we did think that the anime inspirations could make it stand out from the pack, this also can really be a turnoff for some people, and it might just not be the kind of game and style you're looking for.
Sometimes for me, the anime style and voice acting was a little bit much, but I think if you do go into it with the right mindset, you're open to that kind of goofy, silly storytelling, you will like it, but there's a lot of it.
Combat is just dice rolling. Don't expect some really advanced strategies by like playing different cards or building a deck. You're just trying to roll the highest numbers you can.
It's simple, it's effective, but if the thing that you like out of these kinds of games is the deep level of tactics, you aren't really going to get it from this.
One of the biggest things that impeded us during our games of Middara was the rulebook. It did have a lot of errata, and while there is another Kickstarter coming up which will hopefully have a corrected rulebook, it was a pain to flip through, especially when there's so many fiddly bits on the table. This was a Kickstarter game funded back in 2015. I know, I backed it. But it is finally out, and I do think it was worth the wait.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of it, and if this is only Act 1, which is mind-boggling to me. But yeah, I think I definitely had a good time with it. I think it has like a kind of a trade-off with what Gloomhaven was for us, where Gloomhaven kind of frustrated us, I think. You can go watch a review of that. In some ways, mostly from the fact that it didn't feel as thematic, the story wasn't as strong, and we had some issues with like the cooperative nature of it. This really answered all those problems, while at the same time I wish it had a little bit more depth in the combat itself, but it's definitely more the style of game that I enjoy.
Odds are, if you're actually watching this, because we're releasing this right around that Kickstarter being released, which means hopefully they'll maybe mention how the rulebook, they've changed it with errata so it's more maybe laid out better. Because it wasn't just errata, we also felt like the way they laid it out was a bit flipping back and forth where things were.
One thing is for sure, if you live in 2019 and you like the idea of RPG games, but you don't have the time or you don't have a dungeon master, you're in a great space because there's enough content for you to enjoy if you have the group. You can even solo this as well, so that's an option if it's just you. And I think you could probably have a good time. You're just managing different characters, but it might be a little more complicated. But as we said, check out the Kickstarter if you're watching this right as it comes out. You can see what you think. You can look at what the new updates are and all that kind of stuff, stretch goals and whatever they're going to have. And talk to us if you're one of the people who backed this game and you finally got your copy. What are your thoughts on it and the story and the characters and everything in the comments down below? Because that always makes us happy to hear from you. We like it. And of course, the link to the Kickstarter, we'll put that in the description as well. Thank you, everybody, for watching. Until next time, I'm Jonathan.
I'm Will.
And this has been the Roll for Crit review of Middara.
We would love it if you liked and subscribed to this channel and supported us on Patreon as well.
If you choose to support us, turn to page 25.